Hi, everybody, and welcome to Standard Definition, the retro and nostalgia podcast here on the Bus Rush Network, where each and every Sunday we come together with our friends from around the internet to talk about the games, movies, shows, and other topics that make us nostalgic. You can support us and get the show 2 weeks early by heading over to our Patreon, patreon.com/bossrushnetwork, or subscribe to free feeds. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review, pretty please. You can also catch us and our content on YouTube and on bossrush.net. I know I'm starting a bit early with the housekeeping, but I just want to let y'all know that the merch store is now open. I believe we do have the Disney design up and ready. Click on the store tab on our website to buy a variety of items which have our show logos on them, including Standard Def, yours truly, After Dark, Boss Rush Podcast, and much, much more. Tonight alongside me, we've got boss man himself, Corey Dirrig.
Hello, I'm here. I am alive and well and ready to party with Pinocchio.
All night long.
Yes.
Until he has to jet off on an airplane in a snowstorm.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Yeah. It's fine. It's all fine.
And to complete the show, we have the one, the only, Mark Pererra. Hey, Mark.
Hey, everyone.
All right, we'll just jump right into it. We all know that we can't have a nostalgia podcast without recording episodes covering the classic Disney hand-drawn animated movies. These Disney movies will be reviewed in release order, starting with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which we covered last episode, all the way up to Princess and the Frog in 2009. Today's episode, which Corey's going to have to remind me which exact episode of Standard Def it is, but this is the second Disney
no idea.
episode.
I'm not gonna lie. We've recorded so many, and the first one just went up for free feed, so I'm like, I don't know. It's like episode 12. I don't know. It's seriously like, because like we've been recording like back to back some weeks and doubling up and tripling up.
We're doing it for you, fans. We're doing it for you.
Yeah.
And I didn't even introduce myself. I am Stephanie. I am the pseudo-host for the Disney line of the Standard Definition podcast. I'm also co-host of Boss Rush. So today, we are looking at the 1940 Disney animation of Pinocchio. And I'd like to start and maybe change up a couple things. I'll start off with some trivia, or just one trivia question. Who was Walt Disney's favorite character in the film Pinocchio? Was it A, Pinocchio, B, Figaro, C, Cleo, or D, the Blue Fairy?
Ooh, the Blue Fairy.
This is Figaro.
Corey, you are wrong. And Mark takes...
What's the prize? What is it?
I'm going to get you this background of clipping.
Yes.
I'll find a way to get you that background.
She's just going to send you a paper clip that's slightly bent with some googly eyes on it in the mail.
Hey, I'll take it.
Handcrafted. So yes, Walt Disney loved Figaro so much that he wanted to have the troublesome, curious kitten in as many scenes as possible. And I believe he modeled Figaro to be Minnie Mouse's pet, but it ended up being like a dog, I think. Was it? I forgot if it was a poodle or something, but
Actually, Figaro is now Minnie's cat in canon because I watch enough Mickey Mouse Clubhouse to make your eyeballs bleed. And Figaro is Minnie's cat in Clubhouse and in Minnie's Bow Tunes, which is the spin-off TV cartoon.
Yes.
Yeah,
she did have a Cocker Spaniel at first.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right, and then now it's Figaro.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Corey's dropping them hard facts.
Yeah, hard facts about Walt Disney and his cat.
Anyway.
I'm here all week, folks.
Before we get into some of the finer details about the behind the scenes, I wanted to do something about give like a one or two liner of how they want to summarize Pinocchio. And I'll start. For me, I'd summarize, if someone were to ask me and they just stepped out from under a rock and did not know what Pinocchio was, I would say it's a cautionary tale for children.
So don't lie.
What do you think, Mark? How would you summarize Pinocchio?
I mean, I don't think there's any better summary than that. Uh, yeah, I could try to come up with something, but that is the most accurate description. A cautionary tale for kids. Also, not appropriate for kids.
Yeah, yeah.
They say the
listen to
word
that.
ass in this movie.
They
Yeah.
do.
And that's not the craziest thing that happens.
I know. This movie is so like, it's just so out there. I forgot everything about this movie. And this is
So,
like this is my dad's favorite Disney movie, and
really?
Yeah, well, like he just like, for some reason he just loves Pinocchio, and I think it's because like my dad is very like he loves carpentry and he loves like building things and stuff. And Geppetto, I think, reminds him a lot of himself, and like honestly, my dad kind of looks like Geppetto now that I kind of think about it, which is weird.
Oh.
But I think it has something to do with something like that. I don't know. He loves Pinocchio.
Aw. And say your daughter is 2, right?
Yeah.
Say your 2-year-old daughter comes
3.
waddling
She's
up to you.
3.
3.
Sorry.
3. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm
how would
sorry.
you
It's my
describe
kid. I
Pinoc-
just messed it up.
Don't tell your wife you didn't know.
I-
Didn't remember. How would you describe Pinocchio in a sentence or two?
I mean, I think it's like a very good kind of life lesson in morality and how you learn from that morality, and just kind of learn right from wrong. And you have the choice, as long as you have the moral compass, you know how to choose right from wrong. And sometimes you make mistakes, but you learn from those mistakes and you grow from that.
That's beautiful. That was a much more eloquent way than I had put it.
Thank you. That's the first time anybody's ever called me eloquent.
All right, so Pinocchio was released in February 1940, which blows my mind how long ago that was. The runtime was about just shy of an hour and a half, which also makes me miss how short movies used to be. Finances. This movie was notorious for not making a lot of money, and it was considered a financial quote-unquote bomb at the time, even though it's since regained it. So the details behind it was of the film's $2.6 million negative cost, which was twice the cost of Snow White. Disney only recouped about $1 million by the late 1940, where the studio reported the film's original box office taking a varying 1.4 to 1.9 million. And if you recall the date, a big factor was the fact that World War II was happening, and it, the aftermath, impacted the European and Asian market overseas, and hindered international success of Pinocchio and any other Disney releases around the mid 1940s. But I believe, subsequent re-releases of Pinocchio over the years, they have been able to recoup that. So
yeah, especially on VHS and DVD sales for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that movie is 80 something years old. 81 at the time of this recording.
I know. I can't believe it. But, I mean,
I have a block in my head, and it just seems like every time I do time, it starts with the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my head, I think this movie is only 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you say 80, I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah.
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 And one other thing I find... Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, we're 30 years from 1990, everybody.
Oh
which
my
is
gosh.
also crazy.
Ah!
Yeah, there was a meme I shared on social media that the kids in the 90s that talked about the 60s are like the kids now talking about the 90s.
Yeah.
And it's freaking me out.
That's dumb, is what that is.
Gross. That is gross.
It's gross, yes.
I don't like it. But the one thing I do like about this is, this movie clearly came out way before our time, right? It was our parents' time, really. And yet they brought it back to show us. And I don't know about you guys, but I showed my son this movie. So this is kind of like 2 generations worth.
Yeah.
The Snow White and Pinocchio so far. One thing that I wanted to mention about it, and something I really love about the movie, was its music. It actually won an Oscar for 2 musical categories, Best Score and Best Song, for, as you can guess, When You Wish Upon a Star. Very classic.
And, the only time so that was in 1940, or I guess 1941. The next time that the same movie won Best Score and Best Song was Mary Poppins in 65. So it took 25 more years for that double whammy of a musical Oscar to be won, and it was by Disney again.
Wow. I can't believe Pink Elephants didn't win an Oscar, but we'll talk about that in a future episode.
Pass.
All right, let's talk about some of the characters here and just really get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast. First and foremost, Pinocchio, a little wooden puppet carved by Geppetto and turned into a living puppet, quote unquote, by the Blue Fairy. I gotta say, I love the design of Pinocchio. When I looked at the list of all the Disney movies we were rewatching, for some reason, I recalled Pinocchio the least. I just remember, it's like some depressing film and it's whatever. But there was just something very, very charming. Even before the Blue Fairy breathed life into him, or however you want to say it, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so endearing.
Yeah. Yeah, Pinocchio is definitely a iconic design. For me, Pinocchio is like one of the most recognizable characters in the Disney pantheon, especially of those old movies. Like, I don't know if it's just because, like, especially in the 90s and stuff, when they were re-releasing all the VHS tapes and we would get them all, and Pinocchio was always part of the marketing of the classic movies or going to Disney World, right? Or like, I remember my mom used to collect nutcrackers, like Disney nutcrackers, and Pinocchio was always displayed no matter what time of year it was. Or, I don't know, Pinocchio has just always been super relevant in my life, so maybe that's why he's always been iconic and so recognizable to me. But Pinocchio is just so iconic with the yellow hat and like the red kind of lederhosen, I guess, because it's a German cartoon. Like, it's just iconic. And like even like the nose, just like how simple the nose looks, but it just brings him to life.
Oh yeah, speaking of the nose, my dad, it was when I said cautionary tale, my parents really milked that because, I mean, every time my parents either caught me in a lie or they think I lied, they would just like grab my nose and be like, oh, your nose is getting longer. And I'd get so mad. I'm like, that's getting so old.
Yeah, it really hit that aspect of the movie, which really is such a small part of the movie. It just happens in one scene.
Yeah.
But that aspect of the movie has really like entered the zeitgeist and really became a thing where, like, if you lie, your nose is going to grow. Or
it's like a culture, like it became part of culture and like a saying, right. Like you say to a kid, well, don't lie or your nose will get bigger.
Right.
Of course, I tell my new age son this. He goes, that's impossible, Mom.
Well, stop having smart kids. That's what I did.
But I don't think I appreciated this when I watched it as a kid because, I don't know, different things, depending on how old you are. But when I listened to the person who voiced Nikolai and when he first is doing his best to do the right thing, it really highlights, how naive and innocent little kids are. And that, when he gets introduced to the more troublesome characters and boys, how he's just, like I said, so naive and willing to go with things. And it kind of makes me think of, I don't know, like I get worried, think of my own kid and like how innocent they are.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting watching this movie as a parent now, as opposed to as a kid. Because, I mean, say what you will about all the the booze and the smoking and stuff, that aside, like I don't think I really paid attention as a kid to the main plot of the story. He was just a wooden boy getting into some shenanigans, but watching it as a parent, I'm like, yikes.
Yeah, there's definitely some just some worrisome. First of all, he talks to some strangers who are just really just unappealing.
Are we talking about Honest John and
yeah.
that cat that can't speak? I think his name is Giddy or Gideon.
Yeah. I think he just calls him Cat in the movie a lot, though, right? Like that.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like I would have never talked to strangers. Like I was, it was kind of just ingrained in me, like stranger danger type thing,
Yeah.
like don't talk to strangers because they're terrible people.
Especially since they showed up the second time. Remember, they sold Pinocchio off to
Right.
Stromboli the first time and he got away. I mean, I'm trying to recall the second time it happened. I mean, they technically just picked up Pinocchio and kind of carried him on his way. But still, I would have just like booked it and started screaming, "I need an adult!"
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
scary out there.
Yeah. Speaking of Honest John and the cat, I don't know about you. I know it's a Disney movie and a lot of it's fantasy. I mean, you got kids turning into donkeys, but I just found it very jarring and a little odd that the majority of the characters are humans, like human Geppetto, and the Pinocchio that wants to be a real boy going to a school with children. That you just see two anthropomorphic characters, like a walking, talking fox and a walking cat. Like, it just stuck out to me.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's something there about like, if there's some sort of like allegory or something to where Pinocchio viewed them as animals because he kind of trusted them or something. And I don't know. I wonder if there's some symbolism there or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just reaching.
I mean, also like the sly fox is always kind of put positioned as like the bad guy, like the sneaky kind of, yeah, I'm gonna do something to like really get up on you because I'm sneaky or whatever, right? I don't know. It's very different from Snow White though, right? Because like there are no like anthropomorphic animals in there, right? Like they're just all humans and the dwarfs, right? Like that's it.
Exactly. This is the first time we kind of see this blend, so it was a bit interesting for me to see. And speaking of like bad guys and stuff, not to jump ahead, like I like how there's different quote unquote bad guys. I mean, you got Stromboli, which only played a really small part on it, and then you got the creepy coachman guy that took all the kids to Pleasure Island. Like, dang, there's this one part when he's even scared Honest John. He's like, "Oh, the kids won't come back as boys," and there's a blow up of his face, and he's all red, and he looks like the devil. It's terrifying.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a creepy guy.
And how about Jiminy Cricket? I don't want to forget about him. He's a pretty prominent character, at least like you said, in pop culture. You see him. He's synonymous with your conscience. Not conscious. Though I did realize he's like a pretty crappy conscience. He like overslept and he like couldn't find Pinocchio half the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's supposed to represent like maybe sometimes your conscience. Like sometimes there's decisions that seem like they're right in one way, and then they like it's not always. You can't always trust the way you feel sometimes, right? Like or like maybe like your conscience. You kind of second guess yourself a lot, and maybe it takes you a while to have your conscience catch up to you because you don't really know what's right from wrong yet, right? Like Pinocchio clearly doesn't know what's right and what's wrong yet, because I mean he's been alive for what 20 minutes in this movie. Like I mean,
right?
I my daughter barely knows what right and wrong is, and like she's almost 4, so I don't know. I think there's something there too. I'm not quite smart enough to really pick up what it is, but like I think Jiminy Cricket represents a good kind of part of what your conscience is and how you learn from your conscience and how you can how it kind of evolves over your life, right?
I agree because, even though Pinocchio is the central character of this movie and he experiences character growth, I do feel that Jiminy Cricket, whether it's kind of on the nose or not, grows as well, because at first he's just some vagabond cricket, I guess, because he's wearing rags and hopping around to find a nice warm place to stay, and I don't know, he's just kind of living the life, and then he witnesses this poor lonely Geppetto. I love Geppetto. He's just such a kind, lonely soul. Anyway, so he witnesses Pinocchio coming to life, and he actually steps up and volunteers to be his conscience, and again, it could be an allegory for how your real conscience is, but like he becomes a stronger voice. He needs to learn to, because he's almost given up on Pinocchio several times, right?
Right.
He's like, oh, I guess I'll just say goodbye to Pinocchio or whatever. But he develops a strong bond with Pinocchio and ultimately doesn't give up on him. And by the end, he gets a little star badge from the Blue
Right.
Fairy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you think about it like that, that feeling in your gut that you get that tells you, right and wrong, or that you should do this, or that you shouldn't do this, it only is as good as it's been developed, right? So, so the more life experience you have, the more things that you do, the more fine-tuned that it gets. And so I think at first, Jiminy Cricket has no idea what he's doing, and then towards the end, he knows a little bit more because he's experienced some stuff along with Pinocchio.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Like, I hate to say it, because again, as a parent, it makes me think that my son's gonna have to go through stuff like this. Kind of have to make mistakes first,
Right?
To really learn about it. Because if you have someone telling you, "Hey, don't do this," even though you've never had an experience of it, I mean, maybe it'll be successful, but the odds are you have to experience it first for you to really get it.
Right.
Which I think plays into many of the mature themes of this movie. But I think I forgot, one of you said it the last time, is these early Disney movies really weren't geared or intended for kids, really. It was more intended for adults.
Yeah, and I think that the way that Jiminy Cricket grows is actually the way that your conscience grows too, right? Like sometimes, especially when you're younger and like you can either choose to kind of like, if you mess up or you're going down a certain path, you can either keep going down that path and kind of ignore your conscience, or try to make a decision that maybe you know is wrong, but you're just going to go do it anyway, right? Like I think Jiminy Cricket knew that leaving Pinocchio was wrong, and so he made the choice, the conscious effort to go back and kind of be with him. And I think that this movie is almost as much about Jiminy Cricket growing as a good person as it is Pinocchio to an extent.
Right. I mean, they really are supposed to be the same character, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your conscience is a part of you, and so they both go on similar journeys. Where the first time that Pinocchio doesn't do what he's supposed to do, Jiminy Cricket's like, "Peace out, I'm leaving," and then and that's like the same as Pinocchio not going to school, right? So
Right.
It's really about, it's both of their stories together.
Yeah.
Do any of you guys have a favorite character out of all of these, and others that we just haven't really talked about but would like to?
I mean, honestly, I just really love the voice of Jiminy Cricket. I don't know. There's something about the quality of his voice, the kind of the sound to it. It sounds old fashioned, and everything about how he talks and everything. And so I think Jiminy Cricket is my favorite character.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. I feel like, especially watching it now, is almost like as a parent, like really teaching Pinocchio how to be, right? Like I almost saw this movie for the first time from a different perspective, and obviously Geppetto is like the father figure, but Jiminy Cricket is really the one that is teaching Pinocchio, right, and learning with him along the way. And it's kind of like, your kids kind of look up to you because we're the parents and we know everything, right, when they're young. And turns out, spoilers, parents don't know everything. Parents don't know anything. Just throw that out there.
We're just winging it.
Yeah, it's just a big wing job. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I think I really related to Jiminy Cricket because he's really winging it, really, and trying to make the right decisions while learning himself. So I kind of agree with Mark. Like, Jiminy Cricket is definitely the standout character.
Agreed. I can't disagree with that. But just for the sake of being different, there's a special place in my heart for Monstro. That dude terrifies me. He is the massive whale, which, if you think about it now, again, I have to remember that it's a Disney, but like when I think of a whale, I think that they're gentle creatures that just want to be left alone. But this dude is mean. The voice, whoever does quote unquote the voice, and he doesn't talk, but like when he sneezes, it's a loud guttural sound.
Do you know who it is?
I looked at.
It's Thurl Ravenscroft who sings "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" from the Grinch cartoon.
No
And then
way.
he's also voiced. I mean, he was in the Aristocats. He was in he was in Pocahontas. He was in Brave Little Toaster. He was. I mean, he has been voices in movies for a long time, and so his voice has presence, and it was really awesome casting to have him as this just bellowing
man.
For sure. That made an impact.
Yeah. By the way, side tangent. When we're done with Disney, or if we want to ever take like a halfway point break for Disney, can we do like Don Bluth's run of movies?
Yes.
Like Anastasia and American Tail, Fern Gully.
Ooh, Fern Gully, yeah.
All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh man.
Pebble and the Penguin.
Yeah. Dude, remember when Don Bluth almost took down Disney single-handedly in the 80s? Man, good times.
Yeah, well, he came from Disney. So
I know. That's what I'm saying. He took all their best animators because Disney was like treating them like crap. So yeah, I mean, like both Disneys were dead at that point, right? And they were just trying to figure out what to do, how to run the company. And Don Bluth just said, "Screw it, let's go make our own movies." And man,
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because I wish like they kind of remained more relevant now these days, because Disney is gigantic right now. Is everything. It's like a monopoly basically. And trust me, I'm a Disney fan, but they're just way too big now.
Yeah.
But that is a side tangent. But I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, Don Bluth, underrated. I gotta tell you, like his stories aren't as good as Disney's, but his animations and like everything up to like probably like the early 70s into probably like the first kind of run into the 80s are like, you can definitely tell his animation style. And then when he leaves, you can definitely tell a big dip in quality until probably Oliver and Company, I would say.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
And then you get into like Little Mermaid and stuff, and then obviously it's just
yeah.
Anyways,
right.
Back to Pinocchio, I guess.
No worries. I don't know if there's any other character you want to go in depth with. I was just thinking of sharing some more fun facts, and then we can just talk about the movie in general, like our favorite moments and general impressions. Because I definitely want to hit upon the discussion of how adult this film actually was.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things in this movie that like I would not let my child watch this movie like at all.
Yeah, I was definitely squirming when Nikolai was sitting next to me. I was like, this is, I don't know if he's going to be repeating some of these words.
Yeah.
But did you know, guys, that artwork for Pinocchio was worked on for 3 to 5 years prior to release, and at times required 700 to 800 artists at one time?
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, especially watching these movies back to back, from watching Snow White and watching Pinocchio, which I don't think that I've ever done that before. You can really tell the increase in just the intricacy of the art and the animation, and how from the smallest detail to like the end city sequence when you can see that all this and the birds flying and whatever after Pinocchio's a real boy, like it's insane. And like just the different sets, like Snow White really took place in 2 places. There were only really 2 sets, or maybe 3 tops, but this one, like, you've got the whale, you've got Stromboli's place, you've got Geppetto's workshop. I mean, there's so many different locations and settings and characters, and it's so watching the 2 back to back was just really, you can tell. I mean, I'm not surprised it took that many artists, because the growth spurt from Snow White to Pinocchio was insane.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely insane. It was definitely like, I mean, like you said, the sets, like you think of like the whale in the water, and then you go inside the whale and you see the boat that Geppetto's living on, right? And like all the different kind of wrecks in there. And then you see the set of Pleasure Island, which is just so vast. It's so big. It's so much bigger than anything in Snow White, right? And just even like the on Pleasure Island, when you start watching the boys turn into donkeys, right? And like the transformation animations are incredible, where when the ears start coming out, or like when the tail comes out of the one kid's pants, and it's just like pops through, and you see the pants rip and the tail shoot out. It's like it's just flawless animation. Like, it's incredibly detailed.
Yeah, and speaking, I mean, the animation, like the water. I read something. The water scenes in Monstro's mouth, and when they're going going out of the whale's mouth, they used that as a reference in 1989 when they were making The Little Mermaid. Mm-hmm. So 40 years after this movie was coming out, they were using the water animation from Pinocchio to detail how they were going to make an underwater movie, which is like, just goes to tell you how like top tier the animation in this movie is.
Yeah, and Disney's always been like famous for going back, right, and looking at that. You know, not so much anymore, I think, because of like how computer animation works now. But like up until even into like Beauty and the Beast and Hunchback of Notre Dame, you could go back to older movies and say, oh, well, they use that animation here, or they like kind of repurpose that animation here, or redrew it with these characters. And it's like, man, there's just so much connection to those old movies. It's insane.
Yeah.
I know, and I that's probably one of the things I love most about this particular movie was that jump in intricacy. Like, I never would have interest this in real life, but in Geppetto's workshop, you know how many of those clocks there were?
Right.
And apparently there were real models of clocks that Disney had to approve for them to kind of model them into the film, which that's pretty intense, but you know, that's probably Disney's way, right? But I've never seen so many clocks, and it's so detailed, and each one had their own personality. I really appreciated it much more this time around.
Yeah, I read that Disney was such a stickler for perfection that animators would come in and be like, oh, here's this clock that would be in Geppetto's workshop. And Disney would say, you couldn't make that in real life. So no, it's not going to be in our movie. His attention to detail was so fine-tuned that he was like, you know, we have to have a level of realism here. So the animators had to go and build actual clocks to show this design that we made in the movie would actually work in real life in order to get those to work, which is just, and it works. Like the clock scene there's a couple of times when they show the clocks right at the beginning, and then when Pinocchio becomes a real boy, and it's like there's that level of, you know, when we're watching movies, especially when it comes to things like animation and CG, like you have to have that tie to realism so that your brain stops trying to see how it's been made and you just watch the movie. And so things like that made it seem realistic and like it could happen really help to tell the story and help your brain to stop thinking this is animation. I mean, not that you wouldn't look at that and say this is hand-drawn animation, but it just helps you kind of, it's like when you first start watching a movie with subtitles, at first you notice you're reading, and then after about 10 minutes, you don't even notice. It's that realism that really helps you turn that part of your brain off, which is so critical.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Props to Disney for that.
Yeah. And like, you could actually see that, like you said, they would actually have to build clocks. You can actually see, like, when Disneyland started development, just a side story, he used his animators because they already, like, had some sort of, like, side engineering style of animation, and like he would use them to like build small sets to see if things would actually work in the park.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
cool. One last fun fact, a cut song. So when the children are traveling off to Pleasure Island, they were going to be singing a song called Three Cheers for Anything. And as you could probably guess, it was a song about, talking about all the troublesome things that they were going to do when they get to the island, but Disney just felt like it would just take too long and kind of interrupt with the pacing, and he just figured just get the kids to get the scene moving on to Pleasure Island. So I think that was a good choice. I think they spent enough time on the carriage. Just was it Pinocchio talking to Lampwick, I think?
Yeah.
And contrasting the difference between Pinocchio's innocence versus like your typical kid that kind of knows not his first rodeo kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That whole scene is just, I don't know, like this was the kid that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I would never let my up to this point, it was like, okay, yeah, John is like, he's just like this creepy bad guy. He's the bad guy, right? Like from the very beginning. But like, kids are so relatable, and when you have kids interacting with other kids, that was the part where I just like was like, I don't know if I would ever let my daughter watch this movie, like at this age, especially, when he starts like drinking beer and smoking the cigars and
right,
like cursing, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like, what am I watching? Like, I got like flashbacks of like, not like flashbacks, but just how is this movie for kids? And then you just got to remember, this wasn't for kids back then. It's just like, man, definitely a different state of mind in the 40s.
Yeah, I started watching, and I did the same thing with Dumbo. I started watching with my kids. I have 4.5-year-old twins, and I started watching with the kids, and I turned it off at a certain point. Like, I knew with Pinocchio that I was going to turn it off, like right after he performs at Stromboli's performance thing, because then I knew like Stromboli gets, and he like locks him in a cage and stuff, and so I'm like, okay, this is when we're going to turn it off. And then for Dumbo, I kind of forgot that this part happened, but we can talk about this next time when we do it. But when Dumbo's mom kind of goes crazy on all the other animals, and then they start whipping her and tying her up and stuff. And
yes.
So I forgot that was happening, and my kids were like, Dada, what's happening? And so I was like, nothing, it's bedtime.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think, though, that we're in a much different time now than we were then. And I love my parents, but I think that as parents now, we're a little bit more involved in our kids' lives than I think parents were back then. And I don't so much think that you had parents like sitting down with their kids and watching movies with them and like knowing what they're watching and doing all of that. And so I think that there's a lot that flew under the radar that parents didn't really know about because they weren't really paying a ton of attention. I mean, one of my favorite movies growing up was Mrs. Doubtfire. And if you go, fantastic movie, but if you go back and watch that movie, it is wildly inappropriate for kids.
Oh yeah.
Wildly inappropriate.
Also, but like you go back to the, like in the 90s when that movie came out though, like that stuff was totally accepted, right? Like,
yeah.
And like, it just shows you how either like it just shows you how much society has changed, whether you are for it or not. And it's just like, man. But also, like, I remember sitting down and watching James Bond with my dad when I was like 8, right? And him murdering people straight up, and I'm like, oh yeah, explosions, car chases, and shooting,
Yeah, for me, Mark, to speak to that, I think at least for my parents, and maybe it's like a different thing when it was raising a girl or whatever, but my parents liked the Disney movies because it didn't have like a lot of sexual themes. For whatever reason, my parents were like so anti-sexual theme, and it doesn't have to be like that graphic, just any sort of sexual theme. But if they see stuff like, oh, look, that kid's drinking beer and smoking cigar, well, that kid's going to turn into a donkey, so that's what you, like, they don't see that as much of a inappropriateness than sex is. And I think that's different. I think everything's more on an equal plane now, but back then it's like, oh no, heaven forbid there's some sexual innuendo, but drinking, smoking, it's fine.
But that's a good point in that the stuff that they're doing in the movie, they immediately like reap the consequences of their actions. And so it is a very quick turnaround of doing these bad things as a kid and then turning into a donkey, right? But I don't think that kids' movies were being like, oh, if you kiss if a boy and a girl kiss, then there's bad consequences. It was always seen like as a good, positive thing. So like there wasn't that immediate like, here's the thing and here's the bad consequence. It was like kind of glorified the romance aspect of it. So I see what you're saying there.
Yeah. So, well, since we're on it, so yeah, a lot of adult-ish themes. Anything ranging from just being uncomfortable, like at Stromboli's the puppet show. Again, it wasn't like super inappropriate, but I just realized like almost all of the character female the puppets are female, and they're all like hitting on Pinocchio, and they had that, like the French can dance, and
Right.
they're pulling up their skirts. I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird. And I did feel uncomfortable when Stromboli was like thrashing his blade around and locking Pinocchio in a cage. It just made me feel uncomfortable that as a kid, I'll be honest, it went over my head as a kid. I really didn't think much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But and also just the fact that they can say jackass in the movie, and I was sitting there like quiet to see if my son was going to repeat the word jackass, and knock on wood, I haven't heard him say it yet. But
right. This is going to make me sound like a huge prude, and that's fine. I don't really care about that. But I almost like I don't love the jackass thing. And there's actually in one of the Ice Age movies, there's like a whole 3-minute joke about someone calling someone a jackass, and it's a bit much. But what really frustrates me, because I don't feel like that happens very often in movies, but what really frustrates me in kids' movies is when they say things like stupid or idiot or you're dumb or things like that, where it's just like, those are like, I feel like jackass, like that's a really bad thing for a kid to say, right, as an insult. But like, there was some sort of a plot to that, right? Because they were actually turning into donkeys, and that's the word for donkey, etc. But like things like, it really irritates me when kids' movies use like idiot and stupid, because there's so many other things that could be said there, and we just like, it's not necessary. And now my kids are saying, idiot and stupid because they're watching it in this movie. And it's like, it's not that bad for me to say you can't watch that movie, but it's just like, come on, it's a movie for let's just not say those kinds of words, right?
So what? I gotta agree with you. Like, I'm not a prude either, and I don't think that's a prudish thing, because it is, well, again, adult movie, kid movie, but in general, kids movies, like, it should just provide the best. I don't know, but my point is my kid would say that too. That whole story, I don't know if it was on standard definition, and I forgot what movie or show it was, but they called someone a fool, and then at school he was calling all his friends fools and telling them to walk away. Which inside it's funny, like it's freaking hilarious.
Sure.
But like, I don't want my kid like verbally harassing his friends, calling them fools and dumb idiots, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This definitely shows the times were different. We'll just say, for sure.
But to go back to the whole donkey thing, it did give me the heebie-jeebies when like the island was relatively deserted, minus Pinocchio and Lampwick, and they show the coachman kind of separating the donkeys, like those that were fully transformed versus not. And if you look at the signs on the cages, because maybe as a kid you don't read the signs, one's like for the salt mines, and for something, I'm like, ooh, it's really dark there.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it gets dark. It gets real dark, like real fast, right? And I don't know, like it made me really like almost appreciate Snow White in a way, of just how like friendly almost it was, and I know like at the end of this movie everything kind of turns out for the best or whatever, but like I forgot how dark some of these Disney movies are. Like, I know there's always like dark aspects, but just how really dark these old ones get, and it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that like this is Disney. Like I just forgot, and it's not like I'm going back and watching anything before like the 80s, like over time, right? Like I'm just not, like, there's a couple that I'll rewatch here and there, but mostly everything that I will rewatch like with my kids is from, like the 80s onward, right? Like it's just, that is just the era of Disney that I really grew up on and that I love. And, that's the Disney I want my daughter to remember, or my son, right? And I don't know if I would ever show her really anything that isn't like a Disney princess movie from before.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like The Little Mermaid, like, not spoilers, like when Ursula turns all the mermaid people or mermen into those whatever they are, seaweed things, right. In the end, when she's destroyed, they all get free. So not just Ariel has a happy ending. Everybody has a happy ending. But if you really think about Pinocchio, those kid donkeys,
Right.
they're gone.
Yeah, they're
Right.
and you just think like, okay, this is one night worth of donkeys. How many has he like been doing? Like, how many kids are dead?
yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
because of this.
Exactly. So as much as I'm happy that Pinocchio became a real boy, I was like, there's still like donkey children working in salt mines, and now I'm gonna go to bed depressed.
Yeah, right. Man, it's just there's some scary stuff in some of these movies. Like, ooh boy, this is
Yeah, actually, one other thing that was kind of more morbid than scary was near the end where Geppetto was inside the whale. He was alluding to the fact that, like, they were going to starve and die in the whale.
Well, I read that in a previous version of the script, he and Figaro were gonna consider eating Cleo, and they even animated that, not eating Cleo, but they animated that discussion. And you can see in the movie that there's like a frame where Cleo's looking kind of hiding, and Cleo the fish is kind of hiding in her fish tank because that animation made it into the film. But they were talking about eating the fish, which is a little intense.
Yeah. Oof. Man, this movie really made me think about, like, not to get too far into the future, but like when we start watching like Dumbo and like Fox and the Hound or like Sword in the Stone, like how dark are these movies going to be? You know, like even when you go to Disney World or Disneyland or whatever, and like you walk into Fantasyland and you remember like it's the whimsical part of these movies, right? You see Pinocchio dancing in like by the carousel and he's like, you know, like whatever. But like then you watch this movie and you're like, oh Jesus, I don't understand why this movie exists. This is so scary.
Right.
Yeah. So that was great discussion. But now, you know, how about overall impressions of the film? I know we got the darkness part covered, but did we have our favorite moments or parts that maybe we didn't like as much, other than just the dark stuff?
I really like the beginning where like Pinocchio is kind of like learning about himself, you know, and like Geppetto and him are dancing, right? When he turns on all the clocks and they're dancing, right? I think that's a really cool scene. We kind of talked about the clock animation already, but the fact that like they even timed the music to each time the clock would a different clock would start, and like each clock would be like timed to a different set of music, and they all kind of created this song and they were dancing and stuff. I really enjoyed that, and the animation was really well done too. You know, you think back to Snow White and you think of the dwarves dancing with Snow White and like how fun and cool that animation was, but this really felt like they took the dancing to like the next level, and really, really great. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I liked again the scope and scale of this movie. The music was I mean, I didn't love the music from Snow White, just because I didn't love the way that Snow White sang but I feel like in every way that this movie is superior to Snow White, and the thing about Snow White is it was the first one, and I think it will always have that, but I think this is a superior follow-up film to Snow White, and just the legacy of Pinocchio. I mean, When You Wish Upon a Star is the theme of when every Disney movie opens. And then even after, I think it was right after Disney bought Marvel, I think one of the first Marvel movies to come out after that merger was Avengers Age of Ultron. And Ultron's line is, you know, I once had strings, but now I'm free. And they even play a clip from Pinocchio singing that song in the movie. And I think it was a way to signal like, hey, we're part of Disney now. But just the legacy of the movie, and how important a movie it is for, I mean, that the water animation informed how they did water in The Little Mermaid, and it just is this is a massively important movie. When we talked about the legacy on like common vernacular of saying, if you lie, your nose is going to grow. Like, it's just been, it's in everything, and it's just such an important film. So I think that was my biggest takeaway from the movie.
Wow, great call to detail with Age of Ultron. I completely forgot about that. I love that nod.
Yeah, and like, man, that scene in Age of Ultron is so good. I can't wait till we get to that movie in the MCU standard def, because it's I think that movie is a lot better than I think people give it credit for.
I agree.
Yeah.
I gotta say my favorite moments were just anything that had to do with the intricate artistic stuff, like the clocks. Also, this was a plus and a minus for me. When Pinocchio starts searching for his father in the ocean, I felt like him searching for his father in the ocean kind of felt longer, at least compared to every other part of the movie, which seemed to move pretty quickly. So I think that's the only reason why I thought it dragged. However, I think it's because Disney wanted to show off the artwork, because they paid a lot of detail to all the underwater sea life, the landscape. Oh, my mind was blown. So at the same time, I was like, this is gorgeous. And at the other time, I'm like, are they going to get to the whale? Where's this damn whale?
Right.
Yeah.
One thing, I know this isn't about like general impressions of the film, but one of the things that I love to look at, especially when it comes to Disney movies, is there was that time when Disney Toons, the studio, was making sequels to every single movie that came out, and John Lasseter came in and killed that when he became CEO or whatever he was in 2006. But
thank God.
I mean, honestly, I kind of really love a lot of those sequels. I mean, the 2 Aladdin sequels I love.
Have you watched them recently, though? Have you watched?
Recently, within the past 5 years?
Return of Jafar. Have you watched it?
I love Return of Jafar.
Oh my gosh, dude! It's the animation in that movie, because like
it's terrible.
Yeah.
The animation is terrible.
Yeah, and the animation in the sequel stuff is really bad, especially like when we had like a movie day with my daughter, and she wanted to watch Aladdin, and then we watched Aladdin and Return of Jafar back to back. And oh my gosh, dude! Like, the animation is so bad.
Yes. But anyway, I kind of hate those sequels, but I thought it was interesting. They were going to make a sequel to Pinocchio, where they were going to have Pinocchio try to find someone who he lost or something like that. But John Lasseter came in and shut that down. But they are making a live action Pinocchio with Tom Hanks as Geppetto. And then Guillermo del Toro, a trailer for his Pinocchio movie, a stop-motion Pinocchio movie, came out today.
They need to stop
today that we're filming this.
They need to stop making these movies at the same time, right? Like, what was the other one? Jungle Book,
right?
Was like, they ended up having to rename the movie to Mowgli for Netflix because they were coming out literally almost at the same time.
Yeah.
Side tangent. How do people feel about these live action movies?
Some of them are okay. Some of them are better than others, definitely. I think the animation in Lion King and Jungle Book, it's impressive. Jungle Book, I thought, was actually really good until you meet Baloo. And like, Baloo has such a distinct voice in the animated movies. And like, as much as you can love Bill Murray, he just does not fit as Baloo. Like, it's just weird. It's just weird. But I thought Beauty and the Beast was terrible. I think Aladdin is great.
Yeah, I think there's been only 2 good live-action Disney movies, and I haven't seen Mulan, but and I haven't seen Dumbo actually, but the only 2 that I like, I think Cinderella is fantastic.
Cinderella is really good.
I think Cinderella is like the standard that they should try to meet, and I think that Aladdin was really good.
Yeah.
But I mean, Beauty and the Beast was bad. Lion King was lifeless.
Yeah, dude, Lion King was literally just a shot-for-shot remake. Like, it was literally just like, oh, we can make these lions look real now, so we're just gonna literally remake them.
Do it, yeah.
Yes, but then like they did things where like they cast James Earl Jones as Mufasa. I know we're supposed to be talking about Pinocchio, but you put it's the exact same script, and if you listen to it's the exact same lines, and his intonation in 1994 when the animated movie came out is so much life behind it, and so much character, and it's the same line. And he's like, "Simba, you disobeyed me. I'm so angry," and it's like just.
Like he's reading
terrible. Like it's completely devoid of life in any character or anything, and it's
they should have just used the lines from the original movie. It would have been better.
Yes.
Like I get that you want to have this big marketing thing. It was like, we got James Earl Jones back. I'm like, that's great, but it's 25 years later. He's in his 90s. He probably is like tired of it, like no offense to the guy, like he's so iconic in cinema period, right? Darth Vader, Mufasa, his voice is so powerful, but at the end of the day it's like just if you want James Earl Jones, just say, hey, look guy, we're gonna use the lines from the original movie.
Well, and I think, I mean, again, I know we're not supposed to talk about this movie, but I think a lot of it came down to the choices that the director made. I think he wanted to make it seem as lifelike as possible and not cartoony. Mm-hmm. And so I think his direction was, you need to make this a little bit more realistic and have a little bit more gravity to it, and not so, don't give so much. And it's, you can see it in the character designs, you can see it in the songs, you can see, I mean, in everything, it's just devoid of life, and that was a huge problem. But I do think that they've been playing around, to answer your question, Stephanie. I think they've been playing around with the formula of live action movies, and I think that they're gonna hit their stride at some point, and then they're going to be really good. And I think, I haven't seen Mulan, but I heard a lot of people liked it. And I think that they kind of took what worked in the animated movie and kind of made it do its own thing. I think Aladdin worked really well because it used a lot of the same spirit of the animated movie, but it wasn't a shot for shot recreation, and they kind of modernized it well. They gave Jasmine a voice and gave her something to do besides being just a princess who wanted to not be a princess. And so I think once they start doing that and using the animated film as an inspiration for, but not make it a shot-for-shot remake with just cool technology, then I think that they'll start to really hit their stride. And Pinocchio could be one that really does that. I mean, there's a lot of... Pinocchio is known for its story beats and its characters, but it's not really known for like very specific things. And so I think you can take that template and extrapolate on it and make a really great movie. So,
yeah, I got to say, I agree. I have, and I can get into it depending, like when we get to each individual movie, because I don't want to bore the people that are listening. But I have my own feelings about live action, and I know a lot of it has to do with the bias that I grew up with the animated movies, and I probably sound a lot like my parents and everybody's parents. The original is always the best. Well, I really do genuinely also feel that, and I saw Mulan. Mulan's one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. Part of it's just, I'm half Chinese, so I take pride in the original story and what Disney did with it. And I mean, it was okay, but I forced my mom to watch the real life action Mulan, and we both were not happy at the end of the movie, but we'll get there. But I do sincerely feel like Pinocchio, just based on the structure and all that, does have potential to be a great live action, and I would see that for sure.
And Tom Hanks, who doesn't love Tom Hanks?
Yes, I think he'd make a great Geppetto.
Oh yeah, I think Kate Blanchett is the Blue Fairy, and I mean it's got a pretty great cast.
Okay. Yeah, by the way, does anyone think in the animation the Blue Fairy kind of looks like the prerequisite to Cinderella? Just like a very similar character model.
Before you said Cinderella, as you were saying that, I was like, Cinderella. Yes, of course. I agree with that 100%.
Well, it goes back to the whole Disney only knows how to animate women one way, right?
Right.
Like that's
right.
Yeah. So.
All right. Anything that we didn't like too much, or you think we covered it? Because after this, I think we'll quickly discuss our definitive ranking, which shouldn't take too long. But just any last comments about Pinocchio?
I think I think that this movie goes in some really weird directions, and I know like some Disney movies go in some really weird directions, right? Like you look at The Adventures of Mr. Toad and Ichabod Crane, right? Or even Winnie the Pooh with the Heffalumps and Woozles, right? Like there's some, or even Dumbo, right? There's some acid trips in there as well, but this definitely felt like that. I don't know. There's like two very different versions of Disney, I feel like, that spring from this point, right? You have the Snow White kind of split, and then you have the weird Pinocchio style split where you start seeing like, oh, well, this is weird, and they want to try to get weird, and I think it's because they want to stretch their animation chops and just show how impressive of an animation studio they are, right? In some cases it works, some cases it doesn't, right? And in this case, like, a lot of it works, some of it doesn't, but a lot of it is impressive to watch, whether you like the movie or not. And so, like, I think that a lot of what they were trying to do with this movie and why it was, delayed and took longer, and you had up to, hundreds upon hundreds of people working on it at one point, is because, like, they were proud of their animation and they wanted to show people how proud they were of, like, going back to the water thing again. Like, that water's super impressive. It's super impressive. And, and to get animals to animate like that as well, too, right? I think we forget, like, we saw the critter animals from Snow White, and, like, that was impressive, but they weren't part of the movie, right? They were just kind of like hanging out or whatever. And this is where you could actually see them kind of experimenting with different ways that animals animate, which we'll see in Fantasia and Dumbo coming up too, for sure. Like, definitely big animal animations.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, real quick, another movie from Disney that took, like, the weird path. I mean, think of Disney's take on Alice in Wonderland. Speaking of trippy, so
yeah. Yeah.
Right. So now we reach definitive ranking. We are ranking each and every classic Disney animated film. Of course, since we are only on the second one, but next to Snow White, it's not really that great of a list yet. But I'll start with you, Mark, even though you did allude to it earlier, where you feel like Pinocchio would rank against Snow White so far.
Okay, so I have a question about this definitive ranking. Is this my favorite Disney film, or is this the ranking of the best Disney film? Do you see the difference between the two?
Yeah. No, yeah. I think you need to go with your favorite. I think that this ranking is going to be like we're going to rank the favorites. Because, like, it's no doubt that Pinocchio is way more impressive in terms of animation, right? I don't think that there's a question.
Right.
Because, Mark, you brought it up several times, like how many sets and scenes there are with different, moving backgrounds and everything. Like, when you see Pleasure Island for the first time, that's super impressive. Inside the Whale is super impressive. But, like,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that, like, as impressive as all that animation is, like, I think we need to rank our favorites, because I think that's going to be the most genuine ranking, and I think that's where we kind of want to go with it. And I mean, unless you guys have a different opinion, but that was just
I kind of agree, because I alluded to, like, video games, and on the Champions podcast, which is a Zelda podcast, they rank the games annually. And, if you looked at just as terms of best Zelda games, obviously the first Zelda game can't ever be at the top just because of its limitations at the time. Mm-hmm. But it could be a little bit higher in other people's lists, either based on nostalgia or just the fact that it's the originator or whatever. So I was thinking, and like, Mark, please feel free to provide feedback. I was thinking we each give our personal, and then just majority would get, like, the official vote for our definitive ranking.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the reason why I asked that is, if I was saying, like, in terms of my favorite out of the two, Snow White and Pinocchio definitely would be at the top of that list for me. If I was saying in terms of, like, just impact on film and just, like, what's the better movie, I would say Snow White. But in terms of my own personal preference, far and above Pinocchio.
Corey, how about you?
Interesting. I'm gonna say I think Snow White's better. I just prefer Snow White over Pinocchio. When I don't know, when things start making me feel kind of like uncomfortable, or like I don't know, maybe I'm just like not into like I don't know, when things start getting uncomfortable or you see kids in weird situations like that always makes me uncomfortable. It just does, and if to go back to video games, it's why I never finished The Last of Us. It's why I never like want to watch kids get murdered or whatever. Like it makes me really uncomfortable, and I think for that reason I just don't want. It's not that I don't like Pinocchio. It's just like it's not gonna ever make my favorites ever because of just how uncomfortable the movie is, really. So I think I'm gonna have to pick Snow White in this ranking.
I thought about this for a long time because at first I thought Snow White was definitely going to be an easy answer for me, but believe it or not, and you know what, I don't want to sound like a cop-out because, Mark, I agree that if I were to look at this more in an objective way, I think Snow White would take it, but I don't know, as an adult and watching Pinocchio take on some pretty serious themes, albeit the way they presented it is a bit dated for sure, 100%. But I do enjoy a movie that just explores more things that make me think. Again, I'm not putting down Snow White at all, but that's just a movie about, staying positive and about a woman who's just incredibly vain, beautiful on the outside, ugly on the inside, is defeated by, beauty both out and inside, whatever. But I don't know, I felt like Pinocchio tackles complex themes, like what it takes to be a parent and the loss of innocence and maturing and growing with your conscience, and not just that, but just again the art and the music, the theme "When You Wish Upon a Star." I just feel like it shocked me when I rewatched it, but I'm glad I rewatched it, because if I went on this podcast without rewatching Pinocchio, I would have probably put it like dead last or something. But
right,
I'd say for me, nothing personal, Snow White. I am favoring Pinocchio at this time.
Cool. Well, looks like we have it. Looks like Pinocchio is officially ahead of Snow White in our official rankings.
Yeah, and I mean they're all great movies, right? I would say like the worst Disney movie is still better than some great mediocre other kinds of movies out there. I don't know.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how, like, as we move forward with this, how the newer movies kind of stack up against the older movies. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, actually, because my daughter, like, she really loves Moana, and she loves Mulan, and she loves Frozen and Tangled and stuff, and it's like, those movies are really, like, great in their own ways, but, like, I wonder, like, how some of these, the later animated movies are going to stack up to these older ones.
I think it's smart that we're stopping at Princess and the Frog, because I think recency bias might affect things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's smart, because then that won't really play into it.
Because Princess and the Frog is like, I love that movie. I think it's awesome.
It is probably going to be at the very top of my list.
I think when we do get to Princess and the Frog, we should end it with a round table of discussing like the classic animated Disney movies versus, the new age stuff, because I'm going to tell you now, I just personally have a bias against all the new age movies. I still love them. I'm just saying, like, if I had to pick a preference, my heart will always be with the classic animated movies. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure if I can actually justify it with logic, but like, when I had my son and, I'm raising him, I actually am determined to try and expose him to more of the classically animated Disney films before he sees. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm not going to make him watch Moana, which he's already seen at school or something. It's not like I don't want him to watch Frozen. I'm just saying, like, I want to expose him to the classic animation before the more, I don't know, same thing with video games. I showed him Ocarina of Time before Breath of the Wild. I just,
right.
Is there something wrong with my head there?
No,
I think it's to kids, the newer, flashier stuff is going to hold their interest more, right? And it's what everyone's talking about more because it's that recency bias. It's right now, but I think so. You kind of have to, because you have to start with the classic stuff, because it I feel like it's going to give them an appreciation for where it came from and where it is now. And if you start with Zelda Breath of the Wild and then you go back to A Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time, it's like, well, this simple game is it gonna, whatever. But and so I try to do the same thing. And there's a lot that I said I was going to do when I became a parent that I don't do, but
yeah.
I was like, they're going to watch. They're not going to watch any, CG animated movies. They're not going to watch Frozen. They're only going to watch Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and all of those movies. And now, of course, we've watched Encanto 5 times this week already. So, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I think that I think that that's important to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But to that point, you say you want to show your kids the older ones versus the newer ones, and we do a mix of everything. And you know what my daughter's favorite movie is, and her favorite Disney character is Aurora.
What?
From
Really?
Sleeping Beauty. She loves Sleeping Beauty.
Wow.
Loves it. And she has this little Aurora doll, and she calls it baby Aurora. Because it's one of those Disney animator dolls, and she just carries it around everywhere. We've gotten her the Frozen ones, and we've gotten her all these characters and stuff that she loves. Nope, this first one, Aurora, carries it around everywhere. Doesn't go to school without it. Doesn't go to the store without it. She's just it's that one toy that she will take everywhere, and she loves the movie. She loves.
I gotta say that is very interesting.
Yeah. And as much as she loves Frozen and Tangled, which I think are up there for her as well, and even Moana to an extent, she loves Sleeping Beauty to the point where we had to say that movie's not on right now. We have to watch something else.
Nice.
Which I'm sure we've all done.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, heck yeah. I was actually shocked. Sorry, real quick, as we're coming to a conclusion here. I'm watching these Disney movies with my son in tow. I mean, he's already seen most, but starting from the beginning, I was shocked how much he loved Snow White. I thought that would not hold his attention after all he's seen. Cars and Wall-E, whatever, Finding Nemo. He loves Snow White. Because we have movie nights every Sunday. Mm-hmm. It's always Snow White, Snow White, Snow White, Snow White. And I'm like, you like this, I'm joking, girly film about some girl who wants to marry this prince that she met for 5 minutes. And even after Pinocchio, I was like, it was okay. And I showed him Dumbo, which he did not care for that either. And he's just like, Snow White. I love Snow White.
Kids like what they like,
Exactly.
But I mean, that goes to tell you Disney knew what he was doing. He knows what kids and what kids like is, the appearance may change, but the heart of it doesn't change. And he knew what he was doing then, and kids like that still now.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, guys. So
it's why we're doing Disney for you people.
And a little bit for us. But anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to our second installment of the Disney edition of Standard Definition. As we close out, Mark, where can people find you?
You can find me on Boss Rush. I do a lot of the entertainment side of stuff, movie reviews and TV show reviews. And so you can find me there. And you can also find me on Twitter. My handle is ExceptInPererra.
Awesome. And Corey, where can people find you?
You can find me at IamCoreyNHD on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find me hosting the Boss Rush podcast and Arsenal X, the Xbox podcast here. And I also host the MCU part of Standard Definition, so you should check that out. By the way, just a quick housekeeping note on Standard Definition. As these episodes start coming out, all of the Disney ones will be in their own playlist. All of the Marvel ones will be in their own playlist on YouTube, and so on and so forth. So if you just want to binge watch the Disney ones in 5 years when we're done with this, they'll all be there for you, ready to go. It's something I consciously tried to make an effort doing as these start coming out. Because, some people don't care about Indiana Jones or Marvel, and they just want to watch the Disney ones,
Or vice versa, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
No, they will all care about Disney.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. You can find me at Klimov, KLIMOV_author on Twitter and Instagram. I am a copywriter / writer for the website bossrush.net, which again, that is the place to be where you can find pod clips, podcasts, the shop to our merch store, which I highly recommend you checking out designs as they come in. And again, don't forget to check out patreon.com/busrushnetwork and subscribe to our feeds. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye. Woohoo!